So we're here with Dr. Horvath, former UNF professor. You still work for the Times Union, is that correct?
No, I don't. No, I retired from both the Times Union and the university, and now I'm actually living in Indianapolis.
Oh, okay. So you're not even in Florida anymore.
I'm not even in Florida anymore, no.
Awesome. Okay. So let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
So from what I heard, you have been diagnosed with COVID-19, correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
was. I was diagnosed last week. It took me 9 days to get the diagnosis
Wow.
after I was first tested. But yeah, I had it. It's interesting because I didn't have any of the normal symptoms. I didn't have a fever. I didn't have a dry cough. I had almost like upper respiratory kinds of stuff and gastrointestinal stuff, extreme fatigue.
Mhm.
So, but because I have a couple of the risk factors, I have both coronary artery disease and diabetes, and I'm over 65, I decided I would go in and get tested. And 9 days later, bingo.
Mm. It must be rough. So far, how have you been dealing with it? How have you been living your daily life with it?
Well, I finally got out of quarantine a couple days ago, and let me tell you, that felt really good. Other than that, I mean, from the minute I thought I might have it, I was really self-isolating because that's what we got to do. That's the whole idea is we have to stop the spread of this, even if we don't have terrible symptoms. And certainly, I think my case was probably a mild to a moderate case. I was sick, but certainly not like what you see and what you read about on social media.
Right. So did you have to go back and get tested to see if you still had it in your system, or are you just still self-quarantining?
Well, I'm still self-quarantining. I called them and they said, well, we don't have enough tests for you to come back and see if you're fine now. So if you have symptoms, I still have a little bit of a cough. They said, continue staying home. And otherwise, there's not much we can do at this point.
Right. So if you could just go through the testing process, I know there's like drive-through testing here and stuff like that.
Sure. Now, I had to go actually to like a clinic, and then they referred me to the hospital to get tested. But it's different in different states and different places, different if you have a general practitioner. So I know they have drive-through testing there, I think at the stadium in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And it's fairly easy. It's a little uncomfortable, I have to admit. I mean, they do take like a very skinny, very long Q-tip and stick it up your nose. But it only takes a couple seconds, and that's it. That's it.
Oh, this gives me I'm a little queasy about stuff like that. So, so do you have any idea where you could have contracted it?
Well, yeah, I went to visit my younger son, who's also a UNF graduate, in Denver, and it was during that week when everything was blowing up.
Mm.
And so I thought, oh, I can go out and visit him. Then a couple days after I got there, the World Health Organization said, oh, this is a pandemic. And I thought, I better go home. So I flew back to Chicago, actually, and then drove to Indianapolis. So who knows where I got it? I mean, I could have gotten it in the airplane. I could have gotten it in the airport. I could have gotten it in the restaurants or someplace else in Denver because they weren't closed yet.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't even realize they have it until it's too late. And then by then, who knows how many people they could have gone in contact with.
That's right. I mean, in some ways, we're not protecting ourselves, although certainly people with underlying conditions and people who are older are protecting themselves from staying inside. But younger folks, you're really protecting us. You're protecting, the people who are going to be more susceptible. That's why even though you may not get it as severely, you may not even get any symptoms, but you got to stay home so you don't spread it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So what have you been up to while you've been quarantining? I'm sure everyone has their own little story about what they've been doing during quarantine.
Right, right. Well, and interestingly, I mean, I'm quarantining solo. I'm divorced, and so I'm here just in my little apartment with my cat. And the best thing, the thing that has gotten me through it, undoubtedly, was social media, connecting with people, connecting with former students like you, connecting with all sorts of people, and just people who would call me. I was on the phone with 6 to 9 people every day who would call me or I would call them, and that kept me going. That kept me going. And so I'd say everyone should be reaching out to people who are isolating, if they have the virus or not. The other thing that I really enjoyed and really loved, there is an app, and I think students would like, there's an app online called Dial Up. It's one word, and what does many things. It has a functionality that you can connect with people who are reading similar books or like to travel or do all sorts of things. But it has this one functionality that's called quarantine chat. And what it does is it connects you with somebody in the world. Could be in Mexico, could be in Germany, could be in New York City, once a day. And you can talk about your experiences. That has been wonderful, wonderful and eye-opening. And I've talked with people from college students to older people all over the world. It's been amazing.
That's awesome, and that does it. People do need to have social interactions, and despite having socially distanced, we do still need that kind of like human
Yes.
interaction, or even interaction with a pet or something like that to kind of make up for that social
Yeah.
loss.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So I'm sure plenty of students that had you will probably watch this video, and like certainly the people from the Spinnaker are going to watch it. Do you have a message for any of your maybe former students or perhaps your colleagues that are still working at the university?
Well, for students, I would say isolate. Take this seriously. This is, although you look at it and you say, oh, only 1 to 2% are going to die. And that doesn't sound like very many, but it's still 100 to 200,000 people. So you have to stay home. You have to stay in your apartments. It's awful, but we have to. I think for people who are in the age groups who are more likely to get this, who may be more susceptible to it, I think what I would have to tell them is that it's not necessarily a death sentence, and that there is hope out there, that there are lots and lots and lots of people who are going to recover from it. That doesn't mean that we need to downplay how serious it is, but I think when you hear the continual stories of death and destruction, it tends to weigh on our minds, and we have to think there is hope. There is hope in this world.
Right. I don't really have too many other questions, but something that I thought of just before we started the interview is, as a professor, how do you feel about not just university level professors, but educators across, basically across the world now have to go to online learning? How do you think that you would react as a professor, and also how do you think people, what do you think people are learning about this experience so far?
Well, I think online learning is great. I did it when I was a professor there. I think it's a steep learning curve at some universities, because I've talked with some of my colleagues at other universities, and they've never taught online classes. So that's going to be tough for them. I think it's probably a good learning experience. I think when we come out of this is going to be a changed world, and we're going to have to do things differently and want to do things differently. So maybe this is kind of just moving toward what it's going to become.
Okay. Any last thoughts or any maybe perhaps any advice for people quarantining or even facing the disease right now?
I would say stay safe. Do isolate yourself, but stay connected. We need to hear from our fellow human beings. That's so important right now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Hopefully, if it's not out of your system, then you get over it very quickly. I'm sure a
Okay.
lot of people would be interested in hearing about your story and reacting to this, because it is a serious disease, and people need to sort of take it more serious and do the right things in terms of flattening the curve and whatnot.
They do.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great talking with you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.